On last Friday's edition of the Power Panel and the Young Turks, we talked about the family and the connection between this secretive organization and people like Mike Lindell. We're very lucky to have a chance to dive deeper into this topic today because we're also lucky to be joined by the managing editor for TYT Investigates, Jonathan Larsen. Jonathan, welcome back to the show.
Hey, John, how's it going?
It's pretty good, can't complain. We're glad to have you on. We know that you're in the midst of this new series that you're working on. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so we actually obtained something that no one's really had before, as far as I'm aware, which is we got a copy of the 2016 invitation list for the National Prayer Breakfast. And in the past, there's been lots of reporting about individual things at the Fellowship Foundation, the known popularly as the family. They run the breakfast, and in the past there have been scandals about things they've done here and there. This allows us, for the first time, to look at the entirety of their operation. So that's what we're doing piece by piece. We're analyzing it broad scale to see who gets invited, who doesn't, who's doing the inviting, and we're looking at specific individual instances that we consider newsworthy.
What names in particular stood out to you as surprising when you finally got a hold of that list?
Well, I don't mean to tee up the topic too blatantly, but the Mike Lindell connection and the things we found with Mike Lindell were very surprising to me, to be honest.
Well, yeah, we're certainly going to talk about Mike Lindell. Now, this is what we talked about a bit on the Power Panel. And so one area that we got into that I wasn't 100% sure about was, what is there evidence that Mike Lindell was very tapped into like this religious community and the overlap with politics before this, or was this really the beginning of that for him, like deploying his money in service to this particular sort of group?
He's pretty clear in his book that he was not a big religious guy. He talks a lot about his Texas girlfriend and how she would call him on not being Jesus-y enough, not being Christian enough, not having, being sort of Christian in a standard mainstream sense, but not having had that emotional, born again moment where you accept Jesus and you come to know him, and that was facilitated in part by people connected with the family, but it was sort of this gradual process. He met Stephen Baldwin, who was already the Christian actor, who was already connected with people who, because of this document, we now knew had connections to the family. And then some of those folks then became connected to Mike Lindell and became sort of key figures in various aspects of his life and his operations, including getting him into the political sphere, but also, as you said, guiding him towards that moment where in 2017, as he puts it, he had a full surrender, falls to his knees, accepts Jesus.
So from the point of view of the family, what is their interest in someone like Mike Lindell, who previously hadn't been very political? Why did they want to get him tied in to all this at that particular time?
Yeah, so that's a perfect question, and the answer is a little frustrating because there's not a lot of what do they want in terms of a monolithic strategic set of goals. What they want is to build relationships among what used to be called key men, important people, leaders, so on and so forth. That's almost the extent of it, is to build these Jesus-based relationships. However, that doesn't mean that individual actors within the family are not going to have their own interests, right? Some of them might have political interests. The people in the family who were connected with Mike Lindell, they had political leanings, very definite political leanings. And so they have an interest, they have an obvious reason to be interested in a potential ally who's a rich guy, a famous guy, and who is amenable to their political guidance, right? So that's one aspect. I also spoke to a source close to the family who told me that some of the people involved were known for trying to hook a big fish, right? The family pays dozens, scores of people that are known as associates, sort of in the nonprofit world, but they're not salaried per se. They have to raise their own funds, and the Fellowship Foundation, that's the legal entity at work here, that sort of serves as an administrative clearinghouse. So your money comes in, great, we'll handle your expenses, all of that's your salary. So that means you have to find people who are willing to support your work, whatever that work might be.
Okay, and look, so we know a bit about Mike Lindell from over the past year or so. He's an interesting figure.
Yeah.
So as a result of your work here, you got a chance to communicate with him. How did that go?
It did not go great. It did not go great. I think for anyone, to be honest. I emailed a whole batch of questions to MyPillow because they're the only contact point for a lot of the entities and the work that he does. So he asked me if he could call me, gave me his asked for my number, and then he called me and immediately called me a scumbag, said I was lying, all this. And he actually had a sliver of a reason to do so, based mostly on ignorance of how journalism works. I got something wrong in one of those emails. So we sent like a lot of emails, but that's the whole point, right? Of sending emails asking for comment is to check, is all of this accurate? And as it turns out, we actually did have it right. I just screwed up in the email. But so then we had this crazy conversation, if you can call it that. And he said, all right, what is it you want to ask, scumbag? That kind of thing. And so I said, well, I wanted to ask who invited you to the 2016 National Prayer Breakfast. And then he barks like, I didn't go to the 2016 National Prayer Breakfast. I went to 2017. To which I respond, well, you write in your book at length about being at the 2016 National Breakfast and saying this and this. And he's like, oh yeah, right, okay. All right, next question, scumbag.
Next question, scumbag.
Next question, scumbag, right, exactly.
Sounds like a fun guy. By the way, I know that a lot of the work focuses on what you're talking about, the 2016 and who he met there and the relationships he has built since then. Obviously, he's much more in the public eye over the past year. Does he still have any public connection to the family now that he's involved in all these lawsuits and all of that?
Right. So as far as I'm aware, we do know that there was one sort of a friend of the family, not inner circle, but outer circle, who was on the board of the Lindell Legal Offense Fund, which was this legal entity he had earlier this year to sort of, fight for election integrity, that kind of thing. So that's one thing. The other is his spokesperson is a guy named Larry Ross, who's also a spokesperson for and a board member of the Fellowship Foundation, which again is the legal entity that is the family. So the extent of their involvement is a little bit unclear, but there's certainly some of these figures still in his orbit, and hopefully we're aiming to learn a little bit more as we move forward.
Okay, well, we'll be excited to hear that. Finally, the latest part of your series is about, and we alluded to this earlier, the actor Stephen Baldwin. How did he become a part of this?
So that's somewhat unclear, mostly because I didn't care too much. But in his 2006 book, his acknowledgments include someone who is a big National Prayer Breakfast person in terms of inviting a lot of people. This is not a member of Congress, right? They tell you that it's a congressional event. This is a Pennsylvania real estate developer. So he had been in Baldwin's orbit since at least 2006. It's not clear whether that guy was yet active with the Fellowship Foundation, with the family. Baldwin was also associated with a guy, I want to get his name right, Ravi Zacharias, I believe, who was this televangelist who just died last year. Mike Pence and Tim Tebow attended his memorial this year, and he also had connections with the family. His staff were invited to the 2016 and 2018 National Prayer Breakfast. This year, it turned out that he was using his money. His own ministry released a report saying he was using his money to support massage therapists. He committed sexual abuse, things like this. So this all came out after his death. That guy Stephen Baldwin was in that guy's circle, as apparently were other people connected to the family. We don't have all the timing, but that seems to have been how it played out.
Wow, it is a big old mess over there. That's what I'm taking away from it. And I know you're planning on doing further research in this area, correct?
Yeah. And
so if someone's watching this and they want to follow your work in this area, how can they do that?
Well, the newsletter, the tyt.com/newsletter. I think if you go there, you can sign up, and they'll notify you of our latest stories. Our stories are also posted on tyt.com/investigates. And I'm always threading it on Twitter at JT Larsen. So awesome. Any of those ought to keep people up to date. And hopefully you guys will be talking about them too.
We will, and we'll be glad to have you on for future editions. Jonathan Larsen, thank you as always.
Thanks, John.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.